Well, first up, government is expected to this week honor payments of old maturing bonds and coupons of creditors who did not participate in the domestic debt exchange program. This is what Joy Business has picked up from persons handling government's debt obligations. There's more in this report.
The payment target is in line with the Ministry of Finance plan to kickstart the process of paying all the coupons due at least a week after announcing the settlement for the domestic debt exchange program. According to the Ministry of Finance, it needed to have concluded the domestic debt exchange program to have a fair idea as to those that swapped their bonds and those that didn't before it can start any payment. Persons working on government's debt program argue that now that the process has ended, they have a better picture in terms of those that didn't participate for the payment to start. The Finance Ministry announced on February 23 that it has done the necessary settlement for the domestic debt exchange program. So, counting from that date, this Thursday is exactly a week since the program was closed. Persons that will benefit from this government move are coupon payments that were due on February 6, 14 and 20, but they didn't participate in the domestic debt exchange program. Government will come out with a statement this week before the payment, giving more clarity on the process and how the necessary accounts will be credited. About 14 billion Ghana cedis worth of old bonds didn't participate in this domestic debt exchange program.
Well, meantime, 3 bondholder groups are demanding the immediate payment of coupons and principals which matured this month. As you heard, government has assured it will honor its commitments to its domestic investors once they are due. The groups, however, say some investments matured on the 6th and 20th of February, which have not been paid. Joseph Akable has been speaking with convener of the Pension Bondholders Forum, Dr. Edouanani Entry.
Well, this morning we've come as a coalition of individual bondholders groups made up of the Pensioners Bondholders Forum, the Individual Bondholders Association of Ghana, and the Individual Bondholders Forum. The 3 of us, the groups, have come together as a coalition and to come today, send a delegation of about 6 people to come and meet the minister or whoever is there, the ministry official of the Ministry of Finance, to find out why coupons that the minister said will be paid on the 21st, coupon and principal maturity value of bonds that has matured on the 6th, that the minister promised it will be paid on the 21st. That is after the settlement day of 20th. We haven't had any information from the ministry, and therefore we have come to find out why the payment has not been made.
In the course of your agitation over the period here, you wanted exemption. Your main fear was the non-payments. The minister assured you and granted your non-exemption. Are you surprised that this has not been paid? And what do your members, what do they make of what's happening now?
Well, everybody is worried that this payment has not been made. But we can't say that government is unable to pay until we meet the minister and then they tell us why. It may be some other reason that it's not the reason is not that they can't pay, but maybe some challenges. So until we meet the minister and we are told why the payment has not been made, then we will see whether it is government is unable to pay or otherwise.
So in terms of going into this meeting now, what is the main demand you are going in with, and what will you consider to be a good outcome once you come out?
No, we want the payment to be effected. And so if government say, well, I'm going to effect payment today or tomorrow or the next day, we are fine. We just want to make sure that this is going to be paid. The assurance was given, 21st I will pay. And I think that if 21st you can't pay or you couldn't do it on the 21st, it was only fair that that same 21st you came out with a statement explaining why you couldn't make it on the 21st and assuring your investor that, look, I'm going to do this way, wait for me 1 or 2 days or 3 days, I'm resolving these issues so that I come and pay you. But if there is no information, then investors are worried that the time for you that you promised to pay you haven't paid, and you haven't also told anybody why you haven't been able to pay.
Joseph Akable speaking earlier with Dr. Edwanani Entry, who is a convener of the Pension Bondholders Forum. He joins us now with the latest from the Ministry of Finance. And so we are told, Joseph, this is a coalition of 3 groups. Which are the other 2 groups, and did they get a hearing?
And so there's the Pensioner Bondholders Forum, whose convener you heard a short while ago. Then there is also the Individual Bondholders Forum and the Individual Bondholders Association. And so those are the 3 groups that have nominated 2 individuals, each making the 6-man delegation that is supposed to meet the finance minister. As at 20 minutes ago, when we checked with persons who are close to this particular engagement, that meeting was yet to happen because we understand the minister was holding other meetings, and so that meeting is yet to happen. But as far as these members are concerned, they want to have that interaction and receive some information as to why the payment has not happened and when that will be done. And so they are still waiting patiently for the minister. The major challenge as at now is the fact that there wasn't an official request and grant of a meeting of a sort. And so it's not a case that the minister invited them to come for a meeting. Neither is it the case that they requested and were granted a meeting. They decided to come this time around to demand answers on their own because they hold the view that if, for whatever reason, payment could not be effected, and as we heard Dr. Ananientri explain, there should have been some formal communication to them. And once that has not come in, then it behoves on them to come here and pitch camp to demand some answers. And you recall when the exemption was granted them formally by the finance minister, they did indicate that they were going to turn into a committee to keep an eye on this particular process to see how it's going to go. So we understand that this is part of that decision that they took in tracking the process to make sure that the interests of members are protected, because the biggest concern was about government honoring its commitment, and already it has reared its ugly head.
Okay, and so we've got to point out that government assured that it was going to make the payments because they did not participate in the domestic debt exchange program. I'm just wondering, if they do not get a hearing today, what happens next? We know they're good at pitching camp. Will they continue coming to the Ministry of Finance?
I mean, from what we understand, that remains a viable option because their main reason for the protest that is staged over the period here was simply because they wanted an assurance that their investments will be exempted, and number 2, that will not be affected by way of, there will not be non-payment of their coupons and principals when they are due. And so that was effectively the reason why they staged that protest over the period. And so if for whatever reason they achieved one leg of it, then the substantive leg is what is due them, and that is what they want. And so that remains a viable option. But they have opted that instead of going the route, that particular route from the initial step, they would want to first try and get some answers. And if they do not get the answers, in fact, as at 20 minutes ago when we checked with them and they have not had a meeting, what they told us was that they were going to wait till they are able to have that particular meeting because they believe that they should get some answers on what exactly is happening before they can decide on the next line of action. And so they'll be waiting till they have that particular meeting. We know that the minister is around and has been around since about 9 a.m. and they have been around since about 10 a.m.
Thank you so much, Joseph Akable himself, pitching camp at the Ministry of Finance. We'll get back to you if there are some new details. Let's bring in Associate Professor of Finance at the Andrews University, Williams Pepra. Anything we should be worried about?
Good afternoon, Daryl, for calling me. What has currently happened in terms of the payment of the bonds and principals which are due in finance is what we term as settlement timing risks, which is also part of the default risks. So at the moment, we were all aware that government is struggling to raise funds. This may give an indication that government does not have the funds available to pay. That is why the delay has happened, or because of the debt exchange program which just ended, government has not finished with its necessary accounting process to determine the factors or those individuals who they have to be paid. Sometimes the process will take some time in doing the sorting out very well. If the database itself is something that they have to be very sure that whoever gets paid is the rightful owner of both the bonds and the principal. Also, because two bonds are due, the accounting process is sometimes also a little bit cumbersome. So I'm sure that will be one of the reasons why causing government to have this kind of delay. The danger is that if government fails to communicate
Yeah.
to the members on time or to bondholders on time, it is going to affect the 5-year plan of repayment that other investors who bought into the debt testing program will have believed in government. In short, government is going to suffer an element of trust because when there is a counterparty risk or default, the element of trust is eroded, and then it will cause panic in the economy, and confidence in government plans will be affected. And in short, it will make the government look very bad. Already, there have been a lot of mistrust or statement issued by the finance ministries, which they have not been able to honor. So government have to be very careful not to add onto it.
Right. Yeah, I was just going to say a lot of nerves would be calmed if government would just communicate. Well, I want to move on to the next topic. Last week, government announced a postponement of its visit to China to seek debt forgiveness. Your thoughts on this latest development and whether this is going to pull through this talk with China for debt cancellation?
It's a major problem. If you take the bilateral loans that government is having of about 4 billion, 1.7 billion is owed to China, which is about 42.5% of the entire bilateral debt. So China on the table is a country that Ghana has to have a very tough discussion with. Knowing China, that they don't normally go for debt relief, but probably they will reprofile their debt. That is what I am thinking that the Chinese government will go for.
And what would that entail for the education of our audience?
I mean, what you mean is that China will still demand its 1.7 billion, but will ask government that instead of paying me within 5 years, maybe pay me within 8 years, and then they will restructure the repayment process, which will reduce the interest payment. Maybe if we are very fortunate, they will not increase the interest rate charged on the loan. But sometimes they may also ask that because we are prolonging the interest payment, the rate for the interest will also go up. That is where the negotiations will have to be. Ghana, we have disappointed China with the bauxite deal, and there are other a lot of transactions that we failed them. So probably we need to go begging them to consider our situation.
All right.
The indication is that it may also affect government plan of getting the IMF deal on time, unless IMF will have to maybe overlook some of the delays coming in the negotiations and grant us our request by end of March. If not, our possible bet of the IMF deal is something going into the middle of the year.
Let's see how that goes. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Williams Pepather, Associate Professor of Finance at the Andrews University.